I didn't know how I was going to find the money, but I knew that my dedication to the people who needed me had to be greater than my fear. The way I got through it was to focus on who needed me.
Welcome to Women We Should Know with international speaker, mindset reset mentor, author, and your host, Leslie Michaels. With audacious honesty and candor, the Women We Should Know podcast presents the wisdom and life-empowering insights of women who are the embodiments of innovation and social evolution. Please join Leslie as she shares potent conversations that will inspire your personal and professional evolutions.
Welcome back to Women We Should Know. I am so excited to welcome you back today. I know you all think I just say that all the time, but I really am excited over and over. I get to have conversations with these amazing women, and on top of that, I get to bring them to you. So in keeping with our tradition, we have a most wonderful woman today. Like the women we bring to you, she is the picture of diversity and audacity and experience. She brings her grit and her ability to pivot in ways that are absolutely inspiring. I know you're going to enjoy hearing all that this woman has to share with us today and really getting a picture of a broader world of women, a broader world of professional women from around the globe, because our guest today is an international speaker, an international coach. I am so excited to have today with us Elizabeth Bachman. She is the founder of Strategic Speaking for Results and the go-to person for advanced level training in speaking, presentation skills, sales, and leadership. Hailing from Portland, Oregon, she grew up as an actress and then switched to directing in college and found her artistic home as an opera director. So Elizabeth brings a global experience to her clients, including, this is impressive, being fluent in 5 languages. There are some days I can't master English. Anyway, she discovered the art of speaking to get results when she founded an Austrian-American opera company and had to raise $100,000 through speaking. Now, there's a very interesting story that goes with that we'll get to. However, after 30 years of teaching, as well as directing such luminaries as Luciano Pavarotti and Placido Domingo in more than 50 countries, 50 operas around the world, Elizabeth realized that she was losing the ability to be transported by the glory of the music. So it was time to do something else. All of her interests came together when in 2011, she started training presenters. Elizabeth works with high-level women in tech and law who aren't being heard when they speak up in meetings. Now, I'm sure that most of the women listening today understand this. And thus, they see promotions pass them by. Elizabeth helps them develop strategies for raising their profiles within the company while setting themselves up as thought leaders through interviews and publications. Elizabeth is a sought-after speaker and strategist in Silicon Valley, nationally and internationally. And she also hosts the internationally respected podcast Speakers Who Get Results. It is my delight and my absolute honor to introduce you all to Elizabeth Bachman. How are you today, Elizabeth?
Oh, thank you, Leslie. It's it's always interesting to hear your own bio read, and you read it very well and made it really personal. And I appreciate that, because that not every host can do that. So I really do appreciate it. And to be honest, I'm really only here because I have made all the mistakes. So the reason why I am a trainer is because I've made so many mistakes, that what I do now is try to help people not make the same mistakes that I did. Maybe they can avoid some of the painful learning experiences.
Absolutely. And I have such respect for the fact that you lead with that, because we've all seen it. Someone who gets to a certain level, all of a sudden they are an authority, and it's as if they never made a mistake in their life.
Yeah, well, I had spent a lot of time thinking I had to be perfect. And so now I think of myself as a recovering perfectionist, because there's still the rest of me, which says, which I guess we can all spend so much time beating ourselves up for not being perfect, instead of recognizing that we are actually more approachable, more human, if people can see some of the warts.
Absolutely. Well, I have my membership card right over there in my billfold.
Yeah, the recovering perfectionist.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much I want to dive into. You are so dynamic and skilled, but I have this little tradition. I have this little question I like to invite my guests to answer at the beginning. What is not in your bio that you would like people to know about you?
The main thing that's not in my bio is I grew up in a house where the cats were in charge, and we kids, we knew where we were in the hierarchy. And so I really, in many ways, I wish I could be a cat in my mother's household, where I would be thoroughly spoiled and cherished, and all I had to do was sleep. So the thing that's not in my bio is, fundamentally, I'm a lazy cat, and I'm really happy curled up on the sofa, because I'm human. I'm usually reading a book, but getting myself to actually sit at the computer and do work is against what I really want to do, which is curl up in the sofa with a book.
I understand. I'm quite the bibliophile myself. And so congratulations on that. What a wonderful way to spend, especially a snowy or cold, rainy afternoon. And thanks for sharing that with us. I spoke of the fact that you deviated from the mainstream a little bit, built your own company. You had to raise $100,000. Now, there's an interesting story around that, about your $100 donations. Would you share that with us?
Well, it was $100,000, mostly in $100 donations. So that's a lot of small donations. I had found a nonprofit,
yes,
to create the company. I knew how to run the company, how to train the singers, how to do all the production part. It was raising the money that was the challenge. And
right.
I, having started as an actor, I was comfortable talking about the opera, and talking about, I had many, many years of traveling the world directing operas for other companies where somebody else was responsible for raising the money. And this time I had to raise the money for me, for my idea. The 2 years it took me to raise that money to launch the program, I had to do it. I had to do it to convince people to donate to something that hadn't even happened yet. This was really pre-tech startup days, but it was like a tech startup where except that you weren't necessarily going to get a bazillion dollars for your investment. You were just going to get the satisfaction of helping a young performer realize their dream. And to be frank, when I started, I was terrified. And when you go from asking for money on someone else's behalf to asking for money for yourself when you are the product,
right,
I was terrified. And frankly, when I started out, I was terrible. the thing that saved me was a speaker trainer, a woman who did what I do now, a version of what I do now, who liked music, came to one of my fundraisers and saw me doing a terrible job at, putting on all the effort. And then when it came time to ask for the money, apparently my face went gray and my shoulders went up beside my ears, and I looked tragic. And she called me up the next day and said, there's some things you could do to get better results.
She took pity on you.
She did, but she knew I needed her.
Uh-huh.
And it turned out there's a whole art form called public speaking and speaking to get results, which she was able to teach me. And when I did what she told me, I hired her. I didn't know how I was going to find the money, but I knew that my dedication to the people who needed me had to be greater than my fear. So I got over I swallowed my fear. I didn't get over it, but I sort of smushed it down and moved on anyway to raise the money to hire her. And when I did what she taught me, I got results. I'll never forget the first time I went to interview a potential donor. We were in San Francisco, and she had this fabulous house on Pacific Heights with a view of the bay and a view of Alcatraz, one of those great mansions
exactly
at the top of the hills.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in and I did my pitch, hoping I was going to get $100, maybe $300.
Mm-hmm.
And she pulled out her checkbook and wrote me a check for $3,000, which was a scholarship, a full scholarship for a young singer who couldn't otherwise be able to participate.
Oh my goodness.
And she said, I believe you're going to be able to do what you want to do. I believe in what you have to say. And I knew that was the right thing. So having learned that, what I do now is use what I learned about speaking to persuade, speaking to get results, plus what I've learned running a company, plus 30 years of training performers who are presenters. It turns out that the skills you need to sell a service or a product, or the skills you need to sell an idea within a company, aren't that different from the skills you need to sell a song. The difference is just vocabulary, but the fundamental skills are pretty much the same. And now I feel like it's all coming together, plus my own experience with glass ceilings, all comes together to where I'm really supposed to be at this point in my life.
That is wonderful. I want to talk about glass ceilings, but what I want to do first is go back to the point where you said you had to allow your dream to be bigger than your fear. I would like to really focus on that for a minute, because women can really get caught in the fear. And for our listeners, could you expand just on that single point?
Well, one of the things that stops people, anybody, from stepping forward and claiming their power, claiming their voice, is fear of saying too much. When you're within a company, when you're within an organization, it's fear of being thought pushy, for women especially. What if they think I'm obnoxious? What if they don't like me?
Women are pushy and men are successful and assertive.
Assertive, yes. It's society has trained us. Has really actually socialized us that way.
Yes.
It comes from so many different messages.
Yes.
Nowadays, it's getting a little bit easier because young women can see the older women stepping out there and running things.
Yes.
But that's really been the last 10, 15 years.
It sure has.
It's now hopefully picking up critical mass. A huge part of what I do now is helping women step forward and also to be heard, to recognize how they're sabotaging themselves.
Mm.
Going back to the fear, my fear was that I wouldn't be able to afford her. I was living in this feeling of being poor. I mean, anyone who runs a nonprofit organization understands the fear of being poor.
Absolutely.
And the fear of asking for help, of being thought a failure because I couldn't do it all myself.
And that is critical to women. It is critical that we hear someone like you say this, and it's critical that we learn to overcome it.
Asking for help, especially asking for money.
Yes.
Asking someone to give me money so that I could hire this trainer.
Yes.
Was terrifying. And the way I got through it was to focus on who needed me. My opera organization was Austrian-American joint venture, which was mostly focused on giving young singers an opportunity to try something. And because I've always been dedicated to being a citizen of the world, and international exchange is so important to me, it was also secretly, it was an international exchange program that we didn't advertise that, but that was one of the benefits of especially young Americans working with young Austrians and Germans, where you are living and working for 3 weeks with someone who looks just like you, but has very different assumptions of how the world works.
Right.
And it's the sort of thing that they often didn't recognize at the time. And then a year later, 6 months later, I'd get an email from one of the participants who say, now I understand what you were trying to tell me.
Right.
So that was very satisfying.
Absolutely. There's nothing like international travel to expand your education.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'd love to ask you, Elizabeth, what is the impetus? What is the passion? What is the drive for helping women specifically to be heard, to excel, to even be exchange students and learn more about themselves through people from other cultures?
Well, I am a woman who runs a business, and this is career number 4 or 5 for me now. I said I pivoted several times, and a lot of it comes from back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I knew I wanted to run an opera company. I knew I wanted to do more than just direct. I wanted to be the one who was shaping the whole thing. My peers, the artists I worked with, would say, "Oh, wow, you'd be great. I'd love to work. Any company you run, I'd be there. Absolutely. I think you'd be wonderful." And I applied for jobs as an artistic director or a general director. Those jobs, there were 3 or 4 a year come open in the opera business. I would consistently be on the short list, and over, I'd be number 2 or 3, and I would see the job go to a man.
Right.
I didn't know then what I know now, and what I'm teaching now is that I was sabotaging myself. I was marketing myself to the wrong people. Being known and appreciated by my peers was not enough. I wasn't asking to be recognized and mentored by people who were levels above me. I wanted to be recognized for what I wanted without being obnoxious and actually asking. Learning how to ask was a huge challenge. And that's actually one of the benefits of having run a company was I had to raise that $100,000 to launch it. And the $50,000 it took every year to run it again. We did it. We ran for 11 years. So after the first the initial 100,000, I had to raise 50,000 every year to keep it going. We kept it small and manageable. I knew I didn't want something huge. I had to learn how to ask. And I had to learn that, how do I want to say this? How we are taught as girls often that if you ask directly for something, you're being greedy.
Yes.
You're being obnoxious.
Yes.
Yes. You want to be nice. Here's the fear. What if they say no? It's terrible. You're horrible if they're going to say no. What fear they're going to, I'm going to be thought a failure.
Yes.
What I learned was to get out of my own head and make it about the listener. And now I think this is rule number one for anyone who's doing a presentation is make it about your listener, make it about them. What do they want? What are they going to care about? The times that I did not manage to raise money was when I was talking about the how of what we were doing, the cool things that we were going to do that was interesting to me, but not to the donors. What I learned the hard way was if I made it about what the donors cared about watching these young singers, watching the development of these young singers, watching someone who was in love with music be able to fulfill their dream as a performer. Because most of the donors were people who loved to come and listen and weren't able to do it themselves. So they wanted to say, this is my tenor.
Right.
That's my tenor. I helped, look at that. He's singing on stage at the Metropolitan Opera. I helped him get there.
Right.
When I learned that, that's when the donations started coming in. When I talked about the cool things we were going to teach and the interesting organizations we had, nobody cared.
Right. Right.
And basically, nobody knows it was too much how and not enough why.
Exactly.
And that was the mistake that I made and learned the hard way, not to make it more about the why than the how.
Yes. And also that speaks to knowing your audience.
Mm-hmm.
You knew the people who were deeply emotionally invested in opera, emotionally invested in the performing arts. And so that old saying of know your audience and then make it about why sounds like is the magic combination.
Well, it was a magic combination. It is a magic combination. Even if you're in a meeting and you're doing a presentation, say you're presenting to upper management, you are giving them a gift of your knowledge, your expertise. If you're doing a presentation to ask for a job or ask for a raise, it's not like you're asking them to grant you something, which is the attitude that so many of us will walk in with. It's, I can solve your problem if you invest in yourself and in your company by hiring me.
Okay, let's just run that by again, Elizabeth. I think that is one of the most important things that women across the board, even if they conceptually understand it, they have not yet integrated. They have not yet owned it in their cells. Would you mind running past that again?
Well, imagine it's a job interview, or that you're presenting to upper management to get them to approve what you want to do with your team.
Yes.
And let's bring money in there because money makes it always scarier, and money raises the stakes. So you're going to ask them to give you $50,000 to implement this program, or to give you that $50,000 raise. So often, women especially will sabotage themselves by thinking they have the power and I am asking them to give up something by giving me this money.
Mhm.
Where actually what you're doing is you are offering them your expertise, your plan for success, and the money is going to be their investment in their success by saying yes to you.
Brilliant. Thank you for recapping that. That's a big, important point for so many women. And I know in helping women to come to this, you have a signature technique called strategic empathy. Could you speak about that?
Strategic empathy is putting yourself in the shoes of your listeners. It goes back to rule number 1, make it about them.
Right.
Strategic empathy is putting yourself in the shoes of your listeners, imagining what it's like to be them and what are they going to care about, and then shaping what you want to, what you're going to say in a way that will speak to what they need. How can you solve their problem? What is their pain point? That's the strategy part of the empathy. Now, women are trained to be empathetic, which is great. Adding the strategy is what is where I have used, which has made such a difference. And I have to say, it comes from my years as an actor, because as an actor, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the character. You know,
of course,
what is it like?
Become someone else.
Yeah. What is it like to be Ophelia and kill yourself? You know, what is it that makes Ophelia kill herself? Carmen, what is it that makes Carmen do what she does? Take up with one guy and then she takes up with another guy. You know, Carmen is basically the same story as all those crime series where you've got the jilted boyfriend hunts down the girl and kills her. You know, it's like an episode of Law and Order.
What a great analogy. I would have never thought of Carmen that way.
Well, it's like this one of the stories that you see over and over and over and over again on TV. Same sort of story. What does it feel like to be that person? How can you make that person you? How can you become that person while still keeping the craft of the performer, so that you understand the feelings of those person, but you are also still the performer who is shaping the message. And that translates absolutely to speaking, where you are giving a speech, say you're giving a speech in front of a group, you're giving a speech in public, whether it's online or live. What I like to think of, you're giving people ideas, hope. You are speaking to that one person in the audience who has decided nothing's going to ever work for them.
Right.
And you're giving them hope. I also think that on a cosmic level, if you'll indulge me for a minute.
Absolutely.
When we're inspired, when we're really inspired by something above us, say, you know, you get an inspiration from the universe or God, the universe, or whatever you want to call it. If that inspiration is coming directly to the listeners, it's like hitting them with a fire hose.
Right.
So your job as a speaker is to use the craft of words, the craft of delivery, the craft of strategy, so that you can be a channel for that message. And instead of drowning them with the fire hose, you're giving them a cool drink of water on a hot day.
Nice analogy. Nice analogy. Well, I'm going to have to look into this more, and I bet many of the listeners are too. Don't forget that term, women, strategic empathy. Elizabeth coined that. She is the expert. Now, something that I hear tossed about, a conversation that I hear often in speaking circles, is this idea of presentation skills and public speaking as if they are inextricably connected, that there's only one reason for public speaking, and that is to do a presentation, and there's only one reason to do a presentation, and that's to excel in public speaking. But are they that symbiotic?
I like to call myself a presentation skills trainer because that's an umbrella term that includes training people to do public speaking, but it also includes how you show up within your organization. How do you get people's attention? How do you get visibility within your organization? And the strategic part of it that I use is, how do you use it for career development, to rise in your career by building your visibility within the company? You mentioned earlier the concept of women who have a seat at the table but still aren't being listened to.
Right.
I have a custom, my own specific technique for helping women be heard, to speak up in a way that they get heard, which is a combination of who are using strategic empathy so that you are addressing the people you need to reach in a way that they can hear you, and also not sabotaging yourself. And I can get into single focused versus multi-focused ways of speaking. Presentation skills is how do you show up any way you show up, whether it's a job interview or it's a meeting, if it's the meetings that you have every day, or it's a speech outside your company, which is also strategic because it's human nature to take for granted the people that you see every day, the people that you work with every day.
Right.
So when I'm working with someone to help them break through that glass ceiling, if you will, one side is how do you show up within the company, within your organization? The other side is how do you show up within your industry? That is public speaking, by making a name for yourself so that the people who see you every day go, oh, wow, I didn't realize Leslie knew that. I have a wonderful client named Laura, and Laura spoke about doing one of her very first presentations, and she got back to the company and the receptionist said, wow, I didn't know you knew all that. You're awesome. And just that wasn't the person she was trying to reach, but it was someone who had saw her every day and had never realized that she had all this extra knowledge.
Right.
So it's, you've got to do both. It's two tracks that work together and support each other.
That's brilliant. We'll talk more about that after the show. So one thing I'm very curious about, having spent so much of my time in the US and so much of my time abroad, and you have an international audience, an international business. How is it different working with internationals versus working here, and coaching internationals versus coaching here? And of course, if you speak 5 languages, you have a very broad range of internationals with whom you can work.
Well, one of the things I know, and I learned this in college actually, is that I coach people who are giving presentations in English. Luckily for me, English is the international language of business. And when people are doing international conferences, they mostly have to give a presentation in English. When I ran the opera company in Austria, I had to do presentations in German all the time. And I was constantly having people correct me. So I've been the person who's giving a speech in their second or third language. So I've been there, I know that. When nowadays, our business, especially, major corporations and such,
Right.
is increasingly international. So
Mhm.
it's really common to be working with a team that has people from 6 or 7 different countries in maybe 3 or 4 different time zones.
Right.
You have to, one of the specific things I do, and I learned this at the opera, is help people choose words that others can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Not too much jargon,
Mm-hmm.
not too much slang.
Mm-hmm.
I'm married into a German family, so my wife is German, and I hear her say things all the time in English. She's been 40 years speaking English. She'll say something that's actually a direct translation, and then I will turn around and say, what she really means is da da da. And she does that for me in German when we're living in Austria.
Right.
That I will say something that's a direct translation, and then she'll say, what she really means is.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize that if you're speaking English, it might be your second or third language.
Mm-hmm.
It will certainly be the second or third language for a large portion of your audience.
Right.
Slow down, be clear, don't rush. For instance, our names are one of the things that we say more often than any. So if you are, say, Amura Ahmed, I have a client named that, she would be saying, my name's Amura Ahmed. You can't understand that. Make sure that you honor the space between your first and last name. Or if it's a name that they're not used to, say your first name and then say your first and last name. Because it gives people the brain space to, if they can hear it one more time. So my name is Amura Ahmed. It's a very useful technique when you're introducing yourself, so people can people have a chance to catch a name that's unusual.
Right.
When I work with I used to work in Japan a lot. When I was in Japan, no one could ever do Elizabeth Bachman. No one could ever do the L's or the TH. And I got used to being called Elizabeth. But I would make sure to say I'm Elizabeth Bachman.
That's fascinating. And I'm getting ready as soon as we can travel a little bit more freely to go through Europe and work in Europe a bit more again. I'm looking forward to it. One thing I'm curious about, we don't have much time, but I'd like to touch on it, is if you were to give, because I am sure we have women in this audience who are working internationally and are ready to get back out there, or are just starting to work internationally. If you were to give those women 2 tips for honoring the difference in sensibilities without having to take a graduate course in the different sensibilities of the different countries, what would that be?
Strategic empathy. If you know where they're from, then you can put yourself in their shoes and try to make sure that you are not saying something offensive. That's easy to find out. If you're doing something in public, you'll have people from all over. Then what I would say is stick to universal examples. Don't quote a US children's TV series.
Right.
Not everyone's going to know.
Exactly.
Use a universal example. One thing, I'm a big believer in stories and metaphors. Food is a great metaphor because everybody eats. So if you can use a metaphor, don't talk about a Slinky or an Oreo. Talk about what is it like to prepare pasta and tomato sauce.
Right.
Because pretty much everybody knows about spaghetti and tomato sauce.
Right.
That's worldwide now.
That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It can be, when you're first starting out, easy to put your foot in it if you're not paying attention. I know, because I've put my substantial feet in it several times, maybe more than several.
And that's an American phrase. Putting your foot in it, put
That's
your
right.
foot in your mouth means you've made a mistake in conversation.
Exactly.
For the sake of your international listeners.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I would have known that, and I would have slipped right past it in terms of the audience. So thank you for that. Now, I know that there are women out there who have been fascinated by all the things you have been saying, who have latched onto one nugget or another word, and they would like to know more about it. Could you just give us a minute or so on what your top topics are, your prime topics that you work with women, that you help women, that you use to help women fine-tune their presentations and their presence?
Most of what I do is helping high-level women who feel like they aren't being heard. And I do that through solo coaching and also through masterminds, where you get a group together and you have the support of your cohort as well as just yourself. The visible and valued masterminds, those are there. What I would say, the easiest way to find out where you're strong in your presentation skills and where perhaps you could use a little help would be to take a free assessment called speakforresultsquiz.com. So if you go to speakforresultsquiz.com, it takes about 4 minutes, and you can rate yourself where you're strong and where maybe you could use a little support in order to get the results that you need and the recognition that you deserve.
Wonderful. Now, women, if you're on the treadmill or you're driving and you're listening to this, don't worry about trying to scrabble and find a pen to write it down, because I'm going to do for you what I always do for you. I love doing this for you. In the program notes from Elizabeth's episode, when it launches, we will have her URL. We will have whatever contact information she would like to provide, whatever links she would like to provide. And so go ahead, have your walk on the treadmill, drive safely to your destination, and know that we will have that on the program notes for you. Elizabeth, it has been a delight to have you. And something I really enjoy asking my guests at the end of every episode is, what did I not ask you that you really wanted to share with our guests?
I have one thought to leave you with. Anytime you're trying to convince somebody to do something, that is sales. And it behooves you to be a good presenter, because sales is like sex. Nothing happens till somebody gets excited.
I love that. I love that. That is so true and apropos. Elizabeth, it has been informative and enjoyable and a complete honor to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I'm really honored to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. And women, all of you out there, I know, I don't even have to wonder. I know you learned something today. Maybe you learned that you are stronger in an area than you thought. Maybe you learned that you're not the only one who isn't strong in a particular area. And so now you get to be a little easier on yourself and know that, oh, this is just another thing to learn. This is another step to take. Whatever it is that you learn, I am glad that you joined us. And I look forward to seeing you and speaking with you in our next episode. And between now and then, we'd like to remind you to please be kind to yourself.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you received inspiration for expanding your own social innovation and influence. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at lesliemichaels.com/podcast. For more tips, insights, and support in creating a fully audacious, professional, and personal lifestyle you love, visit our Women We Should Know community on Facebook.